Lizard Boy 2, The Most Perfect Summer Ever, is the second book to feature Tommy Tomkins and friends. Like many middle school students, Tommy wants to fit in with the other kids at school, but it's not easy when you're secretly a lizard, and some of your friends have secrets of their own. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and welcome to the Kids Bookshelf. Ahead, we'll explore the book, and I'll talk with the author-illustrator about what inspired the series. Jonathan Hill is a cartoonist, illustrator, and educator. His previous book is Tales of a 7th Grade Lizard Boy, and he joins us to talk about Lizard Boy 2, The Most Perfect Summer Ever, which he also wrote and illustrated. Jonathan, welcome to the Kids Bookshelf.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Dan.
Well, this is the second book to feature Tommy Tomkins. So before we talk about this second book, introduce us to Tommy and his particular unique situation.
All right. And so you figured that the first book being out a couple of years that I'd have this down, but I feel like I'm still a little clunky with it because it's my weirdest book. And so the first book, Tales of a 7th Grade Lizard Boy, is about a family of lizard people that come from the center of the earth. And because of dwindling resources, famine, war, they're sort of forced to flee their underground home of Elberon to live amongst humans. And what's special about lizard people is that they can change their skin to adapt to their situation. And so when they're above ground, they can put on like human faces. And I'm playing off that science fiction trope. But it's really the inspiration for the book is my family's experience as Vietnamese immigrants, and also my experience as an Asian American growing up in the Midwest and constantly kind of having to put a different face on, to try to fit into my situation because, externally I look I'm Asian presenting, but I grew up in the Midwest. I ate American food and I'm as white as can be, but when I'm amongst white friends, I'm Asian to them. But when I go to my Vietnamese family or Vietnamese Asian communities, I don't speak the language. I don't maybe eat as all the food that they eat, and so I stand out as very white. And so, it's about that. It's about fitting in and how we all have to sort of put on a mask. So that. Hopefully that covers the general concept of the book, but also I think the really important personal context to the story as well.
So Tommy's family are basically refugees, and they come to the surface, and Tommy, like all kids, wants to fit in. He wants to have friends, but he has this secret, and that makes it harder for him to fit in.
Yeah, and I think, when I was making the book, again, like I said, it was a very personal, it's my weirdest book, like I said, but it's also my most personal book, but something when I was making it that I really didn't think about at first, but I loved and appreciated that friends and family that I was showing was that they really related to it as well, because I think we all have to kind of code switch in a way. And we all feel like we're outsiders and we all have to put on a mask. I'm very different, like my author presenting, appearance on a radio show is very different than my appearance or the way that I act around like close friends or even with family, or if I'm at a board meeting or something. So we're constantly having to switch. And I think, something that I really appreciated was that, former students and friends who were LGBTQ really responded to it too, how they felt like they might have had part of themselves that they had to hide for a good part of their life. And even friends that, maybe were queer but could be very straight presenting, they really related to it because they're like, I'm off constantly having to put a mask on. So even though Tommy has this secret, I think we all can kind of relate to that. And I think that was something I didn't think about, but I appreciate that it was like, you always start from your experience, but then you realize that it's actually a global experience that everyone can kind of feel.
Yeah, the universal experience that all of us can really relate to. This is a book for middle grade students. So what age group does that cover?
So I think officially that might cover between, I think it's 8 to 12, so probably 5th grade to 8th grade reading group.
So tell us about the plot of this second book. Tommy's adventures continue in Lizard Boy 2.
So I'll start by saying I didn't plan on doing a sequel. The first book was, I just sort of planned on having it be its own thing. And but I had signed a 2-book deal with my publisher, which means that I have to just give them 2 books. They don't necessarily, it wasn't going to be a second book necessarily, but we went into the meeting to talk about what the second book was. And they were like, would you like to do a sequel? And I was like, well, that makes it a very quick meeting, because even though I hadn't thought about that. But so the problem with that, though, is since it wasn't a planned sequel, now I had to figure out what was I going to do, especially because the first book was so personal. And so what I did was, I think I just sort of looked at the characters, and, Tommy's sort of found family starts with Scarlett and Dung in the first book. And at the end of the first book, he finds out that he's not alone. He's not the only one that's different or that has a secret. And I kind of picked that up and just expanded that naturally, and that he has his friends. And Dung's character in the first book, he's Vietnamese, and his family is coming to explore or investigate the sinkhole that Tommy comes out of. They don't know that that's why the sinkhole was caused, but, once the research is done, Dung is going to have to go home. And so the plot of the book kind of starts out with that premise, and that Dung finds out that he doesn't have to go home right away. His family is letting him stay for the summer. And so him and his friends decide that they're going to have one final summer together. They're going to make it the most perfect summer ever. And so they make a bucket list of things that they want to do to just fill their summer full of all the experiences, with an all-American summer, of all the things they could do: getting ice cream, going to the pool, going camping, going to a minor league baseball game, all those things. But as that's happening, Tommy's identity and the identity of the other non-humans in the town sort of are at risk of being exposed, and how that, affects them and how that hangs over them. But, I think then it also becomes, instead of just friendship and taking care of each other as friends, expanding that to community, and how do communities take care of each other, and how do we protect each other, especially when those communities are vulnerable or being threatened.
I'm talking with Jonathan Hill about his middle grade graphic novel, Lizard Boy 2, The Most Perfect Summer Ever. And our conversation will continue. If you're enjoying this discussion, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. And thank you. This is a book, as we've talked about a bit already, it covers so many different themes. It's about belonging, it's about secrets and the impact that has on a person's life, and finding friends you can really trust, who accept you for who you are. So there are a lot of great themes in this book. Are there some other themes that perhaps I've missed that are important for your character development and what you hope kids will take away from this book?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is just friendship and taking care of each other. I think even amongst that, like, personal experience, like I said, of the first book, of feeling othered, really it's a friendship book, and it's about how we feel othered, and we find people that love us and let us be ourselves. And I think the second book just really doubles down on that, and how that our families that we're born into and the families that we make, how important those are. But also, again, like I said, how we need to sort of protect each other and protect our families and our communities, especially those that are vulnerable. And I think, that's really the message that I want to get out of people. I want readers to get out of the book is that, find your people and take care of those people and love those people. Because I think that's like always important, but it feels doubly important with everything scary that's happening in the world right now.
I have a couple questions about process here because this is a graphic novel, and often there's an author and a separate illustrator. Mm-hmm. But since you're a cartoonist, you're doing both jobs. Do you feel like that gives you an artistic advantage?
Well, I don't know that it's an advantage because I've also worked as just the artist and worked with a writer, and I think that they're unique for their own reasons. And I think they both have their own advantage. I think one thing that I think is an advantage is that I'm someone I like to have control over everything. When I'm the author and the illustrator, I get to have a complete vision of that. And I think that book is an example of that. And I think for me, it's not just the writing and the drawing, but in terms of the design of the book too. I like to be part of that because it's an artifact. I don't want people to just read the pages that are the inside. I want to have control over how someone picks up the book and reads it from cover to inside cover to back cover. And, there's like end pages in the book that have photos of the kids in the summer. And, for me, that's an extension of the storytelling, because you're also getting to experience the story when you look at those photos and see, what do these photos mean? What is that? What's happening here? It sort of sparks curiosity. And so I like having that complete control, being the author and the illustrator and the designer.
It all works together. Like I said, that way you can create the whole experience and just kind of hold people's hands as they walk through this world that you've created. So you mentioned that this is a very personal project for you based on your real-life experiences. What is it you enjoy about writing for kids at this age?
I think I just remember how hard it was to be a kid. Like, I look back at my childhood and I'm very fond of it. I feel like this, like we talked about before, is all of my books are just a love letter to something. And both of these books, I think, are a love letter to family and friends. And I think what I like about, even though being a kid was very hard, what I like about writing books for kids is it's also such a beautiful, magical time as you're learning about yourself and you're learning about the world. And so just to be able to go back, and even though obviously I'm, in my mid 40s, times have changed a lot from when I was this age, but I think kind of like we were talking about personal experiences also being very universal experiences. I think a lot of the things, no matter how the culture or the technology has changed, I think there are a lot of universal experiences to being a kid. And I think that writing books for youth lets me honor that and, again, write sort of a love letter to that. And I hope that I hope that comes through and that kids enjoy that, because I'm putting that love and that respect to that age group. And also for them to realize that they're not alone. I think that's a really special, hopefully that's a gift I can give them, that like making friends, it's important, but it's also hard and it's awkward and it's clunky, but you go through it, and through that process, you find the people that you'll really hold dear, for your whole life, whether you're in touch with them, those memories you'll always hold dear.
You mentioned you didn't initially expect there to be a second book. But now that it's out there, are you thinking this maybe will be a series and we'll see a third book with Tommy and Friends?
Well, I would love that. I do have a third book sort of plotted out and planned, but I think that with this one, just like everything, it'll kind of depend on the success of the second book. So if I could plug for a little bit, I will say that if you do enjoy the first Lizard Boy and then the second one, please tell your library, pick up a copy, and let my publisher know that you'd love to see more, because I don't know that I feel like the third book that I sort of had in my mind, I feel like really neatly wraps up that sort of experience. I don't know if it's something I'd like to, do 4 or 5 or 6 books. I think 3 is very nice. It's nice. There's a bookend and a book in the middle, and I really like that. So I do have one planned, but we have to, kind of have to see how business goes.
Well, I know that you do other things as well, other creative projects, other books. So what's next for you?
Well, right now I am working on a book that I'm just drawing with my friend M.K. Reed, and that's serialized. It's for older readers. It's but it's called Budding Crisis, and that is available on Comixology on Amazon. I think it's on Kindle, but right now I'm in the submission process of getting my next book lined up. And so it's sort of a waiting game and waiting to see if that gets picked up or if I have to come up with a new idea. But, which is scary, but also exciting too, because you don't know what your next book is going to be. And so in my case, it's going to be like, well, what is the next love letter I want to write to? And so I'm waiting to hear what that is.
This middle grade graphic novel is Lizard Boy 2, The Most Perfect Summer Ever by Jonathan Hill. Jonathan, thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan. I really, really appreciate it.
If you would like to purchase Lizard Boy 2, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoy this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. Well, thank you for watching this edition of the Kids Bookshelf. I'm Dan Skinner. Until next time, keep sharing the gift of reading.